some things and sent them to CASA as they feel that they have no other option.
And what's happened? And how long ago was that?
Some are relating back as early as last week. Some stem back as far as a year ago. And as from what I can see, not much has really been done.
Can I just ask a question there? In terms of this fatigue, is it the period of the shift, as it were, or which can be gruelling and, you know, cranky blokes like me as passengers, etc.
Can't imagine you being cranky.
Or like if you've got a sick baby or a child at home and things have gone wrong, and you know, is it a balance between one or the other? Which is it the length of the shift or what happens when you're not on shift? Which is the bigger precursor to fatigue?
So no, it's a combination of things. It's the length of the duty itself. It's the passenger loads that occur on the day or on the duty that you operate. It's the reduced cabin crew member that we now operate under. It's the circumstances that occur on board, and obviously what occurs in your daily personal life before and after work as well. Being kids having to be dropped at school or being picked up from after school care. So it is a combination of things.
Can I just ask some questions? I wanted to get your impression of how the Jetstar systems work, and you've given us some examples of issues that crew members experience. One example was being asked to effectively work a double shift after you've arrived at work on that day. What would you feel would the reaction be from Jetstar if a flight attendant said, I don't feel able to do that shift today because I'm too tired?
The reaction is not looked upon favourably.
Right. When you say is not, do you have examples that you can give them on?
I have been involved personally in examples where a flight attendant standing next to me has been informed that she must operate another 2 sectors, yes. It has resulted in tears and back and forth calls between management and crewing and the flight attendant. And the result was the flight attendant became that mentally distraught and, you know, emotionally and physically distraught because of the conversation that had to transpire, that she was deemed unfit to operate any further anyway.
Well, you seem to be implying that there was a series of conversations in which the flight attendant was pressured. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And so you're talking about the next level of management up from the flight crew, or above that?
I've never been involved in a circumstance where flight crew, meaning captains, pressure flight attendants to continue.
Okay, so
the next level meaning it would be, in my reference, crewing, which would be the ones that dispatch us to flights.
Okay.
In this circumstance, the flight attendant didn't see eye to eye with crewing, so it was elevated, or escalated, I should say, to the next level of management.
But is that an unusual event that you're talking about, the example you've just given, or is that?
The example of pressure? No. It's common.
And as I explored with the company earlier today, I'm sure there are times when a crew is unavailable or is supposed to have flown in on another aircraft that's extensively delayed and someone else is asked to take over, and not taking over means the plane doesn't go. I think we all understand those pressures. Is that an area where you've seen or experienced particular pressures? Is it different from other circumstances?
I have also been experienced to those circumstances. I've also had experience in those circumstances as well. A one-off here or there we can understand. As flight attendants, we understand that there is a business to run as well. But when it becomes normal practice, that becomes a concern for flight attendants.
What do you call normal practice?
Or when it becomes a couple of months back-to-back running of flight attendants being expected to extend beyond rostered duties on a daily basis, then yeah, that becomes a big concern for us.
Okay. Over a period of 2 months?
Correct.
So your experience is that for periods of up to 2 months, flight crews have been requested to work additional shifts or duty times to the rosters that were issued prior to those 2 months?
If I may just clarify, cabin crew, yes.
Cabin crew, yes,
Yes.
okay, yep.
Yes.
And what sort of average hours?
It might be an add-on of a coolie return, which is another 4.5 to maybe 5 hours. That would be the minimum add-on.
Yep.
If not an Avalon return, or sometimes just one sector resulting in an overnight. That would be the minimum add-on.
Right.
So how many hours a month do you work?
Under my contract, I am contracted to do 140 hours.
And I think we've received evidence.
Is that a 4-week period?
That's correct.
Right.
And the pilots are on 100 hours, are they?
I wouldn't be able to comment accurately on that.
So do you compare notes with other, like Qantas cabin crew? Are you familiar with what they've got to fly? You know, are they on 140 hours too?
I wouldn't be able to accurately comment, no. I mean, I do have friends in other airlines, and we compare in the fact where, you're out at coffee and you compare your hours and what you've been rostered for the month. But to sit down and compare figures and numbers, I have in enterprise bargaining agreements for purposes of negotiation, but that's as far as, the comparison goes.
And do you occasionally have a yarn to the pilots?
Do I?
Do you say good day to the pilots on the plane?
Of course.
Of course.
And do they tell you that they feel just as tired as you?
Very much so, yes.
And on these back of the flight arrangements, do they have a rest period where they can nod off?
They have that, yes.
And so if you've had a bad, sick baby or a sick child, been to the doctor, etc., would the rest of the flight crew give preference to a person who's had a difficult period in the lead up to the shift for reasons beyond their control? Do you have a little jump seat if you hit Sydney, Darwin and back, that you can have a little camp, or as a cabin crew?
As a cabin crew, yes. I mean, I will give that us. We do look after each other one another as well as we can. So if we're out, if we're about to endeavour on to a back of the clock and someone has come expressing their concerns that their child was up all night or all day, sick and whatnot, we will often, display empathy and ask them, what position would you like to fly today, and would you like to take the first break? Would you like to, how about you sit down and, we'll do X, Y and Z for you. In terms of, do we have a spot for them to have a little nap or a snooze, it would be exactly the same as I previously explained.
So in terms of the safety of the plane and your ability to deal with an emergency, do you have any sort of capacity to be aware that the pilots aren't asleep at the wheel, as it were?
There is a procedure in which flight crew do take their rest, and we are informed, and we are to follow along with that procedure.
So you're involved in that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Could you
We are
describe to this committee that procedure?
It's called controlled rest, where a pilot one of the operating pilots will take a period of rest. They will inform the cabin crew. They will ring the cabin crew and inform them they're taking the controlled rest. That's for a certain amount of time. We then check our watches, inform the other crew, and then when that time period is over, we then ring back the flight deck and go in with a hot drink. And, yeah.
Fair to say that appears to work well?
Appears to, yes.
Thanks.
You give an interesting perspective on driving home after an extended shift. Has that issue been raised with the company, i.e. has it been explained that for most staff members getting a one-way trip home creates great difficulty?
Each individual cabin crew member, when requesting transport, has expressed the workability of that idea. They've always expressed that, well, how am I supposed to come back and get my car? There have been circumstances where the cabin crew member has been lucky enough to obtain a ride back to the airport the next day, but that is based on circumstances and who you get on the phone on the day at the other end. Yeah, they have individually raised those concerns. So I would say that the company is aware of that not being workable.
Is this an issue that arises in enterprise bargaining negotiations?
I don't believe I'm able to comment on that.
It's not covered by your enterprise agreement, or is it?
What's the
Is this
transport?
entitlement to transport covered?
No.
No. Perhaps it should be. In terms of what you suggest, a lack of opportunities to take a meal break in pairing of quick sectors, can you explain that further for us?
We have very short flights. I'll speak out of Sydney because they're probably the best examples I can give you because I operate out of Sydney. A Gold Coast will take us about an hour and 5 minutes to fly. So we'll have a pairing of a double Gold Coast, which means up and down to the Gold Coast 4 times on the aircraft that most of us just really despise operating on, which is the Airbus A321, because it can hold a passenger load, depending on the aircraft, Rego 210 to 214.
It's a stretch version of the A320.
Correct.
Yeah.
So when you operate a double Gold Coast on a Friday night on the A321, you do not get time to eat at all. You barely get time to drink water. And that's operated one less cabin crew member. So it's operated with 5 cabin crew. So you really feel the pressure.
So what have the company said about that?
Well, under my contract of employment, well, you're allowed to have your 20 minutes break undisturbed, but if you don't, you receive a monetary sort of reward, you could say, for not being able to eat. Other contracts of employment don't have that built into their contracts, though. So
Or which do the staff prefer, the break or the money?
I would say 90% would prefer to eat, but if we're not, I think the general conception is that if we're not going to eat, we want to get something for it. But it's, you know, to be quite honest, I mean, when I operate one of those duties, I'm starving. Sorry?
Just out of interest, pilots eat?
We prepare the pilots' foods, yes, they do eat, yeah.
You've noticed that?
That's our number, yeah, we look after the flight deck first before we actually start everything else.
On a lighter note, I actually think they ought to ban tucker on the Canberra-Sydney run. It's a waste of time.
Well, that's an extremely short sector, isn't it? And how frequently would crew members have experienced the near 15 hours duty permitted under the agreement?
I personally haven't experienced that, and under my contract of employment I can't.
Right.
But I have a lot of professional peers that are under the Team Jetstar contract of employment that do that. I would say a good 60% have experienced that, the close to 15-hour duties.
And how frequently, to your knowledge, is that sort of shift experienced by those?
In my personal opinion, too frequent.
Well, when you're saying once a month, once every 3 months, twice a week, what do you mean?
Once, maybe every 3 weeks.
Okay.
Per person, I mean, yeah, per flight attendant.
All right. Obviously, that's because that's what people tell you rather than what you've seen yourself?
No, from what I've seen.
Okay. And are you required to sort of stand by for call up, is that part of your roster? Do you